Good morning, Team Alabama. We are ready for some more of The Lottery Rose by Irene Hunt. We are on chapter 4. Please find it on your Chromebook, page 60. Read along with me and add to your facts. Our goal is to get 50 to 70 facts per book and 10 questions and 10 vocabulary words. Vocabulary in this book is fairly difficult, so it should be easy to grab those words. Page 60. I don't want to talk to you anymore, not to nobody. Georgie ran around the house and back towards the school, choking with his tears. Rosita came out on the back porch, and Georgie heard her say, "What on earth?" But he didn't speak or look at her. So he had just gone to the house across the street from the school, Mrs. Harper's house. And she's known to be this lady who had lost her son. And he wants to plant his rose bush in her garden. He thinks it's the perfect spot. And it looks just like his book at school, the flower book at school that he always loved to read, and he stole it from the school a couple times. And Mrs. Ames, the librarian, was so nice and let him have it. So page 60 also. At 5 o'clock, he did not go in for supper, and at 6, he once again did not go to vespers or evening prayers. Timothy found him at dusk, sitting on the street curb facing Mrs. Harper's garden. Timothy was plainly out of patience with him. "Gosh, Georgie, don't you try to do the right things here at all? Sister Mary Angela was worried when you didn't come to supper. Last night, you didn't meet me where I told you to, and now tonight—" He broke off suddenly. "Where have you been, Georgie? Just tell me that." "I ain't been nowhere," Georgie muttered. "You actin' mean," Timothy said, but his voice was for some reason milder. "I am mean. And I am dumb. Leave me alone, will you?" Georgie glared at Timothy, as he had glared at the gray-haired man across the street. Sure, I'll leave you alone," Timothy shrugged indifferently. "But then, lots of kids around here are mean and dumb. I am myself. Sometimes," he added, and his words sounded proud. Georgie closed his eyes for a few seconds, and his head ached worse than ever, and the sore place across his back throbbed. He wanted to crawl into the cool bed where he slept the night before and lie in the dark where no one could see him. He knew that he couldn't, though. There were things that he had to do before he could rest comfortably. What's he going to do? What's Georgie going to go do? Make a prediction here. Put in your question area. "Does your arm hurt you, Georgie?" Timothy asked after a while. "No." "How did it get hurt?" "A big kid hit it when we had a fight." He looked at Timothy with dull eyes. "I thought Sister told you not to ask questions." "Well, don't you want to go inside and get something to eat?" Timothy asked, refusing to be angered again. "No, I just want to be by myself." He turned his back on Timothy. "Why don't you go away?" he asked wearily. Timothy finally turned away and walked back towards the entrance of the building, and Georgie leaned his head upon his knees and moaned softly into his anguish. His anguish's hurt. When he heard Sister Mary Angela say his name, he thought that maybe she was going to scold him, but she didn't. "Georgie, you must have something to eat before bedtime. You've hardly touched food all day. I know you feel strange and lonely right now, but you'll feel better soon. Come on, we'll get a glass of milk and some bread and butter from Sister Teresa in the kitchen." "No, I don't want nothing to eat." "Well then, we'll get you ready for bed, and I'll leave something on your bedside table. Maybe you'll feel like eating later on." She put her hand lightly on his head and ran her fingers through his hair, flinching as Georgie did, when she suddenly encountered a swollen knot hidden in the thick brown tangle just below his crown. He got to his feet slowly, picking up the bush that he had laid beside him. They put it back under his window and walked together into the building and down the long corridor to his room. He allowed her to help him off with his shirt, and when he stood stolidly against the wall, trying to hide the wounds on his back, "Nobody can look at my back except in the hospital," he told her grimly. "Go away. I can get ready for bed myself." The world was black outside his window. By the time that he was in bed, he lay awake, wide-eyed and frightened at what he knew that he must do, but determined and unyielding. What does he have to do? What does he think he has to do? When Sister Mary Angela looked in on him as she made her nightly rounds, he closed his eyes and lay unmoving on the pillows. She called to him softly, but when he made no reply, she walked away, closing the door quietly behind him. He waited for a long time until everything was quiet along the corridor, and then he slid out of bed and stood at the window looking out at the house across the street. Many windows were lighted, and Georgie leaned against his own sill, waiting for the lights to go out and for the time to come when he could safely believe that everyone who might possibly be looking out at the garden was in bed and asleep. Underneath his window, the rosebush leaned crookedly against the wall, wondering perhaps why Georgie was so slow in giving it the bed that it needed, in giving it a chance to grow the scarlet roses that the tag tied again around it had promised. Scarlet, what color is scarlet? Okay, add that to your vocab. Scarlet is red. He hurt at the thought of his bush, feeling neglected and unloved. A jet roared across the sky, and Georgie's eyes followed the blinking lights until they were finally lost in darkness. As he watched the plane grow dimmer in the distance, he thought of the lady in the garden. What if someday she would fly away across the sky into a place so far away that no one would ever see or hear of her again, leaving her garden for Georgie to look after, leaving the little boy to be his friend and to play with him among the bright flowers and under the trees. He wished desperately that such a thing might happen. Finally, all the lights were out except for the tiny glow from one of the second-floor windows, and Georgie moved cautiously around his bed and opened the door of his room with great care, making no sound. He had learned to move stealthily. Excuse me. Let's add stealthily to our vocab. Quietly, with care. For a very long time, it had been necessary to make no sound, as if he were to avoid Steve's hearing him. It had been good training for the project that he now had in mind. He walked barefoot down the corridor, breaking into a run, on tiptoe as he neared the front door. The locks were simple. The great iron key had to be turned, and then a sliding bolt could be moved back easily if one got it in its proper groove. Once the bolt was pressed back, the heavy wooden door opened noiselessly, as if doing its best to cooperate with Georgie, to help him with the thing that he had to do. He thought suddenly of the unlocked door at the entrance to the apartment in Tampa, and the memory, together with the blackness of the night into which he had stepped, sent a spasm of fear through his body. He trembled as he thought of Steve stepping out of the shadows, grabbing him and throwing him to the ground. He stumbled at the thought and fell on the steps, where he lay for a while gasping with fear. And then finally, reassured by the silence around him, he crept around the building until he found the rose bush under his window. "I didn't forget you. I didn't forget you. I didn't, he repeated the words in a whisper over and over again as he tugged at the bush with his free hand. Then, pulling it beside him, he crossed the street and opened the gate that led into the garden. The latch clicked as the gate swung back into place, and Georgie cowered for a while, waiting to see if anyone had heard. Okay, add the word coward. He needed a spade badly, but there was none to be had, and so with his hand he dug into the damp, sandy soil until he had made a hole which he hoped was deep enough to take care of the long roots that must be covered. He did not know where to find water, but that was a matter for tomorrow, and for the time being he pushed all tomorrows out of his mind. Tonight there was only one thing that really mattered. The rosebush was at last in the place that was right for it. He stole back to the school's front door just as the bell in the tower chimed 11 times. Once inside, he turned the key carefully and slid the bolt in place as securely as Sister Mary Angela had done when she locked up for the night. Back in his room, he noticed that the world rocked all about him, and when he climbed into bed, he clutched at the sides of his mattress for support until the beating of his heart quieted and he was able to sleep.